So Dr. Price, Dr. Lisa Price is the next speaker. She's a naturopathic physician, physician doctor. And of course her bio and her abstract are in the booklet. I hope you'll read it. We, I think, met online. I saw a bunch of her articles that I really thought were important information for our audiences to hear. So, come on up.
All right. Yeah. Well, welcome, everyone. It's such an honor to be here and to be here with all of you, and I'm hopeful that I can impart some information that will be helpful for you. My name is Dr. Lisa Price, and I have come to you from Seattle, Washington. I thought it was going to be a lot warmer here, and so I'm a little disappointed, and I'm chilly. So I wore my fancy shiny jacket, and but anyway, it's actually very beautiful here. In Seattle, Washington, I practice complementary care, cancer care, which is working with patients, their oncology teams, and including their oncologists, to help them thrive through treatment and into remission. And today's talk, it's listed a little bit differently, but today's talk is entitled Good, Great, and Precise Diets, aka Whole Foods, Plant-Based, and Genomic-Based Diets, aka Food as Allies. I'll be mainly focusing on the creation of personalized diets using genomic information and why this innovation is important in the fight against cancer. I'll skip that slide for now, but just a little bit about me and my journey into naturopathic medicine. I was a graduate student in biochemistry in upstate New York, and I finished that program, and I headed out west to Seattle, Washington. And on the way, I found this form of medicine called naturopathic medicine. And as a scientist, I asked myself, is this woo-woo, or is there some validity to it? And I wanted to know. It was a burning question that stayed with me for about a year to 2 years. Because if it worked, it would work using natural means with lower side effects and also less of an impact on the environment as well. And so the burning question took me into going to school at Bastyr University. I entered in 1994 and graduated in 1998 with the intention of just going into research. I waited for the NIH to come get me, and they did not show up. So I had to go, and I worked at a public health clinic in Seattle, Washington, and also a private health clinic. But lo and behold, in 2005, I was awarded a National Institute of Health research grant, and our group was one of the first groups to do research on the mechanism of action of turkey tail mushroom. And then I added also in reishi and hericium or lion's mane mushroom as well. And so for me, it's very important to know the mechanism of action of things that we work with so that it's not a gimmick. It's not something that we're just taking, but it's something that we know works and we know how it works. After that, research grant was ended, we finished it in 2010. That was extended a little bit more in 2011, and then I was asked to join a private practice that specialized in complementary cancer care, and worked in some of the larger cancer centers in Seattle, Washington for 10 years. And now I have my own solo practice, and then I'm in two other practices, and also I do telehealth. A little bit more about me, just really, really briefly. I'm an author of 3 conventionally published books by Demos Health, a publishing company out of New York, on culinary nutrition and cancer. I'm a radio host and contributor, and adjunct faculty at Bastyr University, where I teach a Master's of Science in Nutrition students. I'm also an environmental activist, and as you know, and I've just mentioned, an active clinician. So before we dive into diet and nutrients, it's necessary to understand how they are involved in cancer development and prevention. This understanding starts with the cell cycle and its regulation. So the cell cycle, and I don't want anybody to freak out because we're just going to take a little walk through some technical aspects. I think it's really, really important for all of us to understand the cell cycle, and that this is where the mistakes that happen in the cell cycle is where cancer begins. So the cell cycle consists of 4 different phases, and it's not really that important to understand or to memorize those 4 stages. But what is important is that the cell cycle is highly, highly regulated. With each point of the cell cycle having a lot of regulation with regards to protein and enzymes, and other such things, checking for cell size, DNA replication and fidelity, meaning the precise replication of DNA, DNA damage, and also looking for nutrients. Nutrients we know is coming from food and nutrition. When everything's working well and functioning properly, we get beautiful cells dividing, and they're exact replicates. When we get mistakes that are made, the cell division usually, when the body can handle it, usually stops. There are proteins, for example, proteins that come from genes. One of the main genes that we'll talk about at the end of the talk is called P53. And P53 will shut the cell division down because the DNA or the other cellular apparatus is broken. And so either the cell will fix itself, or if there's too much of an inflammatory load or too much damage, the cell undergoes apoptosis. And apoptosis, who's heard of apoptosis before? Yes, because this is a really, really important concept in cancer, and it's one that, again, we'll talk about towards the end of the talk, but one that we want to be able to induce or to support. So apoptosis is also known as cell programmed death. When there's too much damage that has occurred in the cell will self-destruct. All of these processes, it's not just one thing that happens, it's a cascade of many things, and it takes many different genes and many different proteins to happen. So that review of the cell cycle is really important to the process of selecting food that's good for us. For example, minerals and vitamins work as cofactors and coenzymes in normally functioning cell cycle. When these are deficient, the processes that protect normal cell division work less effectively, and there are more changes and mistakes, i.e. cancer development, and then also other chronic disease processes. For example, DNA fidelity, and when I say fidelity, that means the precise replication of DNA, is dependent on vitamin B12. If you're deficient in vitamin B12, you're going to have more chance or increased risk of DNA damage and therefore cancer. Also, if you are deficient in vitamin C and E, you also can have an increased risk of chromosomal damage, again leading to DNA damage and then cancer as well. The other concept that I wanted to talk about is inflammation. So a lot of us, when we hear the word inflammation, we think, oh Lord, inflammation is bad. We don't want that in our body. But the fact of the matter is that everything in our lives, and even at a microscopic level, there's balance. And we've all probably heard the word homeostasis. So generalized inflammation is not great. Chronic generalized inflammation is not great, and we'll talk about that in a second. But there are instances where inflammation at the microscopic level or the microenvironment level has to be there, and especially with regards to cancer, and we'll talk about that in a second. But let's take a look at just general general inflammation, and why that's not the greatest, and how the body actually handles it for a little while. So we have inflammation, and inflammation comes from, we might bruise ourselves. We also might have some type of external stress that causes us to produce stress hormones or adrenaline, and that causes inflammation as well. And inflammation is defined as an increase in inflammatory cells. Those inflammatory cells come to the area, they do their job, but in doing their job, they produce things like hydrogen peroxide and other molecules that are pretty active. They want to bond or have some type of chemical reaction with things. And when they form that chemical reaction, or actually they are the free radicals. And when those free radicals attach to DNA, or if they attach to other proteins or enzymes, they can damage those things. So here on this slide, we see in the box that says inflammation, free radicals, and that there can be DNA damage. Down here, this is how the DNA damage causes what we say is dysplastic or precancerous cells. And those precancerous cells, usually the body can handle those things as long as there's enough nutrients, right? Enough nutrients in the form of like magnesium and phytonutrients like polyphenols or antioxidants. The body can handle those. And so the body, when those things are around, it stimulates apoptosis to happen, and it also inhibits cell cycle proliferation, which is good because you don't want those cells, those damaged cells, to proliferate. And it stimulates repair processes. So that's good. That's how it would normally happen. But if this is tipped so that there's a higher amount of tumors and there's less of these repair processes going on, then we start to get in trouble, because what we have